A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam & Company. My name is Cam Edwards. So glad that you have joined us today. Coming up on the program in a matter of moments, Tim Schmidt, founder and head of the United States Concealed Carry Association, going to join us. Talking about the record high number of background checks that, generally speaking, has translated to a record high number of gun sales in this country. So what are those new gun owners doing? Are they just going home with their firearm and then sitting there and not doing anything with it, maybe putting it up on the shelf? Or are they actually going and getting some training? Are they applying for their concealed carry license? Are they embracing their Second Amendment right, or merely acquiring a firearm, and that's as far as they're going? We'll talk about that again with Tim Schmidt coming up here in just a moment. Before we do, however, President Trump has a huge announcement for his supporters. He'll be celebrating the 2020 Republican National Convention this summer, and he wants you to enter for your chance to join him at the convention. So if you win, his team will cover the flight and hotel and give you VIP access for yourself and a guest. All you have to do is text ENGAGE to 88022 today for your chance to meet President Trump at the convention. Again, that is ENGAGE to 88022 to enter to win this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be his special guest, paid for by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. All right, so coming up also on the program this afternoon, we do have today's armed citizen story. We have our recidivist report. That one I got to tell you about, but I'm already fired up about that one, as well as today's good deed of the day. But did have the opportunity to sit down and spend some time with my friend Tim Schmidt from USCCA, talking about, again, that historic surge that we are in the midst of right now in terms of gun sales, new gun owners. At least anecdotally, that's what we're hearing. National Shooting Sports Foundation estimates that between January and June of this year, there were as many as 2 million Americans who became gun owners for the very first time. And of course, in June, we once again saw a record high number of background checks. Looks like at this point, something we'll ask Tim, but at this point, I think the expectations are that these types of numbers are going to continue, at least for the immediate future, as Americans are understandably concerned about the increased crime in their neighborhoods, about the uncertain future that we all face. And so as Americans, again, are embracing their Second Amendment rights, or at least choosing to exercise them, what are they doing with those new guns? That's one of the things we talked about with Tim Schmidt of USCCA. Take a look and a listen. Hey, Tim, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program. It's great talking with you today.
Cam, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. I think what you're doing for the freedoms of America is very worthwhile and just simply fantastic.
Well, I appreciate that, and the sentiment is shared here as well. I think what you guys are doing with USCCA is fantastic, and I mean, honestly, with the incredible surge in both gun sales and new gun owners around the country, I'm curious, is that translating into an increase in both concealed carry holders and then folks reaching out to your organization?
I'll tell you what, Cam, the change has been palpable. So, I'm sure you've heard the firearms background checks spiked to all-time record levels of 3.9 million in June alone. And I'm telling you, our membership spiked by over 300% in the month of June. It's just literally, we can barely keep up with the demand. And not only people, becoming members of the USCCA, but there's so much demand for training. I think people are smart. They realize that, hey, if I'm going to be a brand new firearm owner, I need to know, what I'm doing with this gun. And I applaud people for that perspective, because it is very important. So yeah, it's been a huge, huge boon. Yeah,
I'm actually really glad to hear that, because you're right. We do know that there are a lot of new gun owners out there, and I don't want to say that I was concerned, but, there's always that inkling in the back of your mind, like, boy, I really hope these people don't just buy a gun and think, they're an expert with it. So I think the last time actually you and I had talked was in the midst of the coronavirus closures. A lot of ranges were shut down, and we were talking about ways for new gun owners to, access at least some sort of training online, because that was something that USCCA was really pushing at the time.
Yeah, exactly. I remember talking about that, Cam, and it's important to remember that you can't shoot a gun online. And the ultimate training is when you're with a professional instructor, a certified instructor, and you're at a range or you're in a shoot house or you're in a virtual training environment, and you're actually using the gun with your hands. But like we talked about, not everyone has easy access to that. Especially when during the COVID-19 crisis. But even now that more things are open, it's still important to have a dual, I guess I would call it a dual path training program where you've got great virtual training and you've got great live training. And at USCCA, we do both of those. So that's what we're all about.
Are you seeing any trends in terms of who your new members are? Can you easily define them, or does it just look like a cross section of America?
Well, so from a geographic perspective, our membership roles reflect the population density of the country. So there's really nothing different there. However, I will tell you that anecdotally, we can track the amount of call volume that we have, and we can extrapolate that to get some sort of statistical significance. And yes, a lot of these folks have tons of questions about like it is their first gun. And, they need to know, do I need a holster? How do I pick out a holster? Where do I get good training? And so I do feel a lot of these new customers are brand new gun owners.
Well, I mean, that would jibe with what we're hearing from, gun store owners across the country. I was talking with Tiffany Teasdale out in Washington State at Linwood Gun last week. And she said she's seen almost double the number of new gun owners, coming in over the past couple of months. And every morning, she said, when she goes to open up the doors to her store, there's a line out the door, already waiting to get in. And so I'm not surprised to hear that. I know locally we've been seeing actually a lot of older women, and in many cases widows, and they're going into our local gun store here in Farmville with their kids. And they're saying, all right, I haven't really ever felt the need to have a gun before, but now I do. I'm living alone, and I want that extra bit of protection. And thankfully, they too are turning around and getting trained, and in many cases, getting their concealed carry license. I mean, this really seems to have been a Second Amendment awakening for a lot of Americans.
Oh, Cam, I love that term, Second Amendment awakening. It's a freedom awakening, and trust me, all these millions of new gun owners, they're not thinking about going hunting; they're thinking about protecting themselves. And so, Cam, let me ask you a question. So, has this happened to you? So, you and I both have been in the firearms and the firearm safety and freedom business for decades. So how many of your friends or people that you knew that really had wanted nothing to do with guns, all of a sudden they're calling you up saying, "Holy cow, Cam, what do I buy?"
I have had probably a half dozen of those conversations just over the past couple of months. And it's funny too, because, some of these folks that have kind of reached out, and it's always very quiet, please don't talk about this, but, and I'm happy to talk with them, but I always do ask them, so has your mind changed about some of the gun control laws that you've supported in the past? And Tim, it's interesting because about half of them have said yes, and about half of them said no. They're still on board with gun control as long as they can get their guns. So I'm still working on that outreach, but it's fascinating. Not everybody has embraced everybody else's segment rights. Some people, unfortunately, have embraced their own and are still prepared to ban magazines and ban guns and things like that.
Well, it's okay. At least that's a tiny little step in the right direction.
Exactly. And we can work with that. And I have a feeling that, in the months ahead, as we start to hear more about Joe Biden's gun control agenda, that folks are going to be taking another look at what happened. I know, again, going back to our conversation with Tiffany Teasdale in Washington State, they've had, I guess, 3 rounds of gun control, either via legislation or referendum. And she's talked about this with new customers that have come in, and, they've got a very diverse customer base. They're up there in the Pacific Northwest. And so they've got a lot of, people who've been fairly anti-gun, voted for, 1691, I think, in Washington State, that big referendum. And now they're asking, like, what do you mean there's a 10-day waiting period? I want my gun now. And I said, well, funny thing about that, you actually voted for that 10-day waiting period. So I hopefully that's a part of the awakening that we're seeing taking place. But I do want to ask you while we got you here, Tim, because unfortunately, every day on this program, we cover armed citizen stories, people who are acting in self-defense, and I've had no shortage of those stories. Unfortunately, we've also seen a couple of other stories that have, kind of popped up and gotten much more national attention. I think the mainstream media really tries to avoid the legitimate armed citizen stories, but if they can catch a gun owner behaving badly, boy, all of a sudden, that's a national news story. And so, there was that incident in Michigan, I think, where there was a concealed carry holder got into an argument with a woman as they were coming out of Chipotle, and did you brush into her daughter? And then the words were exchanged, and it became more and more heated. Eventually, the couple starts to drive off. One woman bangs on the back of her SUV, and the woman gets out of her vehicle, pulls her gun, points it at the woman. Both of them, I think, end up calling police. The gun owner and concealed carry holder is now facing assault charges along with her husband. When you see stories like that, first of all, what's your reaction? And then, how much of this, in terms of training that we're talking about, also involves, training about when it's actually legal and proper to display your firearm, when it's actually legal and proper for you to use your firearm in self-defense?
Yeah. So Cam, first of all, when I see stories like that, it's devastating. It's devastating because obviously this person was not very well trained. They didn't understand the concept of the force continuum and when it's okay to use your weapon. And so from a training perspective, you have a huge responsibility to train yourself and know what you can and can't do, when you decide to go armed, when you decide to carry a gun. It does frustrate me that the media, the mainstream media, is complicit in subverting the good stories of armed citizens, because they happen significantly more often than these random stories of poorly trained armed citizens. Thousands and thousands of times where good guys stop the bad guys. And it's horrible that the news media only will put out those rare random bad stories, but it all comes back to training. It all comes back to training, and you need to understand what you're doing, and it's not something that you just do once and then you're done with it. It's like eating and bathing. The best results occur when done on a regular basis, and that's what at the USCC, that's what we do. We literally convince people. We show them how when you train on a regular basis, that's the best way to protect your family.
Yeah, if you don't want to stink, bathe regularly. If you don't want to stink as a gun owner, train regularly, right? I like that. I think there might be a whole little ad campaign in there, Tim.
Oh, that's funny.
So do you see this surge continuing in the months ahead? I look at these numbers and they just keep growing. At this point, I think maybe the only thing holding back gun sales is availability. At this point, do you see, is this, I don't want to say the new normal, but is this a pattern that you're expecting to continue for the next several months?
I'll tell you what, Kim, as the leader of the USCC and as a business owner, I have to try to predict that kind of stuff. We've already hired over 150 new employees just this year alone.
Wow.
And in an attempt to keep up with the just amazing demand of USCCA membership and training. And so my gut feeling tells me that nothing is going to change. Nothing. We're going to see this demand until well after the election.
And what makes you say that?
Well, because it all comes down to the society's general perception of, I guess I would say, a combination of fear and uncertainty, mm-hmm. and maybe a little doubt thrown in there. And I don't know about you, but I have very little confidence in most of our government leaders in terms of, the way that they've been getting information out regarding the COVID-19 situation. I mean, you turn on any news channel right now and it's just, you never know what to believe. And so that just general feeling of fear, uncertainty, and doubt causes people to think to themselves, man, I need to be my first line of defense, especially when, again, you turn on the news and all you hear about is, hey, we need to defund the police. We need to get rid of our police officers. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And so, yes, the demand it's going to stay up there.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up the defund police movement, because I think that is actually driving a lot of it. And you're right, that's going to continue no matter who wins in November. And I think this is something that a lot of Americans are concerned about locally. They're seeing perhaps not even their city councilors calling for a defunding of their police department, but they're also seeing violent crime spike. I mean, we've seen, and in places where there are plenty of gun control laws on the books, right? Shootings up, I think, 300% in New York City compared to the same time last year. Shootings are up in Chicago, Illinois, California. Baltimore, Maryland's going to have a fifth straight year of 300 plus homicides. The idea that, we can pass another gun control law and everybody's going to be safe. I don't think Americans are buying it, quite frankly. And so I think that there is this, fundamental desire to protect yourself and your loved ones. And that plays out as we see, this rise in crime.
Yeah. The thing is that events do not equal the explanation of those events. And there are so many talking heads and pundits that try to explain away the subjective reality of eliminating police departments, saying that, this will be a good thing. But, that's just your opinion. The reality is that if you take away the good guys, the bad guys will flourish. I mean, it's very basic and fundamental. And that's exactly, like you just said, Cam, that's exactly what we're seeing. And so the only natural, for people that are free, the only natural response is for them to become that first line of defense. And that, it's so simple and clear, but so many people misunderstand it.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, it seems like a lot of Americans get it as well. Tim Schmidt with USCCA. Listen, always a pleasure talking with you. Hope we get a chance to do this again very soon.
Yes, sir, Cam. Love talking with you as well, man. Take care and stay safe.
I appreciate it, bud. We'll talk to you soon. Tim Schmidt joining us here on Bearing Arms, Cam & Company. All right, before we get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report, one more reminder for you that President Trump has a huge announcement for his top supporters. He'll be celebrating the 2020 Republican National Convention later this summer, and he wants you to enter for your chance to win a opportunity to join him at the convention. If you do win, the team will cover the flight, hotel, give you VIP access for yourself and a guest. All you have to do is text ENGAGE to 88022 today for your chance to meet President Trump at the convention. Again, that's ENGAGE to 88022 to enter to win this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be his special guest, paid for by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. So let's turn our attention now to our armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report. We will start there. Case out of Massachusetts. Massachusetts, just like we were talking about with Tim, another state with plenty of gun control laws on the books. As a matter of fact, these state courts have already basically said you don't have a right to keep and bear arms. The Supreme Court might have said that, but we're still going to treat the Second Amendment as if it is a privilege. And yet, violent criminals in the state of Massachusetts are often getting off with a slap on the wrist for their violent crimes. So this individual, Elvis Burgos, he's 40 years of age. He is in custody along with his 21-year-old son, Joshua, each charged with 3 counts of assault with intent to murder, discharging a firearm, and discharging a firearm within 500 feet of a building. According to authorities, it was a Tuesday night when the father and son allegedly shot a mother and daughter in what a prosecutor described as an ambush at a park in Fall River, Massachusetts. The Herald News reports that the two have entered a not guilty plea. A dangerousness hearing has been scheduled for July 14th to determine whether or not they'll remain behind bars until they face trial. The women both listed in stable condition as of Wednesday evening. According to the Bristol County Assistant District Attorney Danielle Pixley, a 12-year-old boy was also in the back of the woman's vehicle. He was unhurt during the barrage of gunfire. They found 14 shell casings there in the area. Pixley said around 8 p.m., police got a call from a woman who said that her daughter was being threatened with a gun by somebody named Josh. So police arrived in the area of Mulberry Street and received information that the woman threatened with a gun was on her way to the police station. The woman never arrived. But another call came in a short time later saying that a woman had been shot in the head near Kennedy Park. That woman was the mother of the woman who was initially threatened. And the bullet entered the base of her left ear, exited out of her left eye. Her 33-year-old daughter suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the leg. The daughter told police, quote, "Josh shot her and tell me she's okay." Police went to the Burgos home where they found the father and son along with the 3 other females. Initially, Elvis Burgos denied that he had been outside when the shootings occurred, but surveillance camera footage collected by police tell a different story. The assistant district attorney says it appears through surveillance that both parties had essentially ambushed the vehicle, the victim's car, and had struck it multiple times, striking the car with 2 different firearms. Mom and daughter both at 2 different local hospitals. And according to police, Elvis Burgos, well known to them. In fact, just a couple of years ago, 2017, Elvis Burgos pleaded guilty to conspiring with his girlfriend and making his teenage son, Josh Burgos, who's now facing charges, rob a Fall River McDonald's back in 2013 when Josh Burgos was just 14 years old. According to witness statements, Burgos' girlfriend was a shift manager at the McDonald's. She went to the fast food restaurant about an hour before her shift began, and she opened a side door. And then Joshua Burgos, again, 14 years old at the time, came in through that side door armed with a handgun. Witnesses say that he reportedly pistol whipped the shift manager and ordered her to open the restaurant safe. After taking cash, he left the McDonald's, was supposed to have met his father behind a local convenience store. Elvis Burgos allegedly decided to have his son commit the armed robbery after he was unable to find someone else to commit the crime. I mean, he could have done it, but instead he decided to have his 14-year-old son do it. So he gets charged, gets taken to court, and amazingly, again, cops a guilty plea, gets sentenced to, you ready for this? 18 months probation. Yeah, 18 months probation. Got his 14-year-old involved in an armed robbery of a McDonald's. 18 months probation. The only time behind bars that Elvis Burgos did for that crime was any time that he spent in jail awaiting trial. That's it. And then he was right back out on the streets. 2007. He's not even on probation for that crime because he pled guilty back in 2017. Of course, now he's facing much more serious charges, as his now adult son, who, I got to say, old enough to make your own decisions at this point, but man, you got to wonder what happens to your mindset when you grow up with a dad who encourages you, maybe forces you to commit an armed robbery when you're just 14 years of age. All right, on to our armed citizen story of the day. St. Louis, Missouri, where an off-duty sheriff's deputy shot and killed a carjacker on his way to work on a Wednesday morning. This story, I got to say, we're still trying to learn all of the details here, but right now this appears to be a pretty clear-cut case of self-defense. Actually, I said this was Wednesday morning. This was actually Monday morning, July the 6th. This deputy who works at the Carnahan Federal Courthouse was on his way to work when he saw a car actually hit a man. Turns out the driver of this pickup truck had carjacked it just a brief time earlier, and then turned around and actually hit the carjacking victim with his own car. St. Louis Post-Dispatch says the carjacking victim and his 10-year-old grandson were walking on the sidewalk after they had been carjacked in the parking lot of a McDonald's. The fleeing pickup suddenly made a U-turn and headed towards the victim by going north in the southbound lane. So he was driving the wrong way down the street, going after these victims. Pickup veered onto the sidewalk and then hit the man. Apparently missed the grandson. Grandson not physically hurt. Victim taken to a hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The sheriff's deputy was in uniform driving, but off-duty, driving his personal vehicle when he saw the pickup hit the man. Pickup then crashed in the yard of a home several feet from the sidewalk, and the suspect took off running. That's when the deputy ran after the man and ended up shooting him. Police say that there was a weapon involved. Sheriff Vernon Betts said the 19-year veteran of the sheriff's office called him from the scene, shaken, saying the 51-year-old deputy is a sergeant in charge of the security detail at the Carnahan Courthouse and the Civil Courts Building in downtown St. Louis. Said the deputy is a, quote, smart and trusted supervisor who has never shot anybody before. Sheriff Betts said in the process of all this, he was attacked by the guy. St. Louis County Police investigating the shooting did not provide details on what happened immediately before the deputy fired his gun. County police spokesman said she didn't know if the suspect had pulled a weapon on the deputy or if a weapon had been recovered at the scene, but the spokeswoman said that the suspect did have some kind of weapon when minutes earlier he had carjacked a black Dodge Ram pickup. So again, what we believe this case is a case of self-defense right now. We will await further information. I'm glad to know that the man who was hit by this carjacking suspect is going to be okay. I want to know more about that aspect of the story as well, because it seems kind of odd, does it not, that somebody would carjack a pickup truck, and then as the victims are walking away, the driver of that truck would then turn around and hit one of those victims, and then crash the car and then take off running. I suppose it could just be a case of a criminal not really thinking more than 5 seconds ahead. But I do want to hear more about this case in particular. And then finally today, our good deed of the day from the Lone Star State of Texas, Socorro, Texas. As a matter of fact, the El Paso Times reporting that a Socorro Police Department officer ran into a burning home to save an 8-year-old boy in a rescue captured on video. Officer Joshua Gonzalez ran into the home on Monday as 2 buildings were ablaze on the same property. And again, police officials say officers had responded to the fire. They saw neighbors helping the residents and trying to use a water hose just to try to knock down the flames. Weren't having much success at doing so. But then Officer Gonzalez sprints into the home, disappears into the black smoke, and emerges moments later, again, with this 8-year-old who suffers from smoke inhalation, but it looks like is going to be okay. Amazingly enough. This 8-year-old is going to be all right. And Officer Joshua Gonzalez, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. That is his very good deed. The police chief there in Socorro says that Officer Gonzalez, quote, undertook a selfless act when he entered one of these houses to remove a family that was still located inside. His actions are a credit to himself and representative of the caliber of officers who work for the city of Socorro. So again, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Officer Joshua Gonzalez, we thank you, sir, for your very good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program today. We will be back with more of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation tomorrow, including a sneak peek at what is likely coming up in the state of Virginia with a special session expected to be called by Governor Ralph Northam. Originally supposed to be called to deal with the budget crunch caused by the coronavirus closures, but Democrats in control of the legislature now want to add all sorts of, defund policing measures, gun control bills, including perhaps the gun ban that Governor Northam did not get the first time around. House Bill 961, which would ban modern sporting rifles, magazines over 10 rounds, legally owned suppressors. Yep, that could be coming back in a summer session in Richmond, so we'll talk about that on tomorrow's program. But in the meantime, thanks again for being a part of the program today. Be safe, be well, be free. We'll see you soon with another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam & Company.